Hello and welcome to another episode of my sound design tutorial series. Nowhere the Boy here. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you 4 stock Ableton FX chains that I use in my music and that I think you'll find useful as well. So the great thing about all these effects chains that I'm about to show you is if you have Ableton, then you have all these effects, so you can follow along with everything that I'm doing. So this first effects chain is one that I like to use for intros and transitions, and it's a great way of bringing a sound into the song. So we're going to be using some reverb, we're going to use an audio effect rack, we're going to use an auto filter to bring this sound up and kind of sculpt it into the song. And the sound that I chose is from December Sample Pack, and it's called Alien Tank Effects Loop, and let's take a listen to it right now. So I chose this sample for a couple reasons. First off, it's a cool sound. It's got a lot of tonality and texture and that crispness in the top end, and so I think it's a very expressive sound. But the other reason why I chose this sample is because it starts out very intense. You know, there's nothing about this sound that says, I'm easing into the song. It just kind of drops you right in. So we're going to reverse engineer that and give some movement here and some a growing quality to this sound. So first off, we're going to go ahead and grab a reverb. And in particular, I'm going to grab the Forest Floor preset. And that was just a preset that I found when I started Ableton, and I just really like the sound. I do a little tweaking, but it's a great place to start. I find with presets, you shouldn't feel ashamed if it's closer to where you want to get with your sound, then use it, then take it and apply it to your own workflow. So I got this Forest Floor reverb, and first off, I'm going to change the quality from mid to high. So that's pretty much all that I'm going to change, other than the dry wet and the decay time. And being that this is an intro, I'm going to want it starting out really washed out, and we'll gain clarity, as we get closer to measure 17 here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the dry wet all the way up to 100%. And we're going to draw in some breakpoints, and we'll go from 100% down to 0%. Really simple. So we're going to start out super reverberated, and it's going to get nice and dry as it gets closer to the next section here. And then we're going to go ahead and take the decay time. And similarly, let's start it up at 60 seconds here. And we will drag it down all the way to 0. So once again, we're going from extremely decayed down to extremely clean. And, since these automations are exactly the same, maybe we'll take this decay time and let's alter it slightly to give a couple, a couple different automations here, but they're doing the same thing. We're starting out really reverberated and decayed, and we're going to get very clear. And so if you take a listen to it right now, so you can hear as it slowly comes into focus. And so now what we're going to do with the sound is we're going to further exaggerate that. So before we do that, let's go ahead and throw an audio effect rack right after the reverb here. And I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my presets that I made. And all it is it's a 2-band audio effect rack. So we have the low end here, and it's chained to mono. And then we have the top here. So let's go ahead and rename these high and low. And the reason why I'm not putting this reverb in, maybe just affecting these highs, and why I'm affecting the sound in general, is I want to affect all of the frequencies and then go ahead and, in this case, mono that low end and allow the high end to be all nice and stereo. So we got the Forest Floor here, we got the audio effect rack. The next thing I'm going to do is grab a ping pong delay, and we're going to throw that to the top end here. So we're only going to ping pong delay all of the frequencies above 150 hertz. And in a similar way, let's drag this dry wet. Once again, let's start maybe at 100 here, and let's Let's make this one a little more sloped like that as well. And to finish off this effect, let's go ahead and take an auto filter and throw it at the end of the chain. And this is going to be a really simple, low pass filter. And so let's start it here at 0 or somewhere around 0. We can obviously tweak all of these parameters. I'm just doing this to show you how simple it is to get an effective intro. And let's go ahead and drag that up to 20,000. So now if we listen, the sound's going to be really quiet at the beginning, and it's going to grow, and it's going to slowly build over these 16 bars. And that's what I'm looking for in intros, is that transfer of energy. So we're starting at this small point, and we're getting to this big point right here. So let's take a listen to what we got. So there we go. Already the sample has been evolved to have some growth, and we could further accentuate that. We could go ahead, fade it in a little bit. We could also maybe adjust the resonance on this particular filter, and maybe we don't want to start at 0. Maybe we want to start a little higher up. So let's take a listen to that really quick. And there we go. We're getting a transfer of energy now. We're taking this sound and we're giving it an origin. We're giving it a place where it starts, and we're getting a place where it finishes. So you can do this kind of effect with, drums. You can do it with vocals. You can do it with a synth, and it's just a really effective way to build out an intro quickly. All right. So this next effects chain is so simple and straightforward, yet I felt it's important to include because I still use it all the time, and that's OTT and saturator on an 808 bass sample. So I went in and created a little bass line, and let's take a listen to how that sounds unprocessed. And so this is the basis for what we're going to use for OTT and saturator. So let's go ahead and drag OTT over the sample here and take a listen to how that sounds. So we're getting a nice, brittle, crisp high end, and that's what I really like to then bring out with the saturator, because as you'll notice, the volume level is significantly quieter when OTT is applied to the sample versus when it's off. So here's the sample without OTT, and here's the sample with OTT. So I'll use saturator to bring this sound back up to that original level, and in doing so, overdriving the sample and getting some interesting distortion. So using this analog clip, which I find to be just a great algorithm, let's go ahead and just up that drive. And compared to the original 808, we got some dirtiness and grit, and we can start adjusting this bass a little bit. And, this isn't even exploring any of the other algorithms, but right off the bat, we're getting a nice, full, and fuzzy sample. And you'll notice I use this a lot in my sounds. That's how I get such a distorted, bright high end. And I do that by applying OTT and saturator, not just to the sample as a whole, but to an audio effect rack. So go ahead and, like I did earlier with an audio effect rack, splitting the highs and the lows, let's go ahead and drag this OTT in right before the EQ8 on this high end here. And so that way we're preserving this low end, and then we can get even more intense with the saturator. So now taking a listen. And so I'm going to scoop out some of these low mids right here. And now let's mess around with the algorithm. So let's try the sinoid fold right now. So I find this is great for getting some kind of laser sounds in your bass. And so that's where the EQ8 really comes in handy, because you're going to be able to scoop out those frequencies that are a little less than enjoyable and get that nice end result. So I'm liking how that sounds, so we could do more with the sinoid fold. We could, work with this medium curve or hard curve, but I find the wave shaper to be really enjoyable. So let's go ahead and select that. And off the top here, it just looks like another one of the algorithms, but if you hit this triangle here, you'll be able to adjust the curve, the depth, the damp, the period, and this way we can get even more tonality out of the saturation. So this is the sound without the curve all the way up. And now that's the sound with the curve all the way up. So what I like doing is automating this curve amount. So maybe here, we'll have it come back to this resting point, but then over the course of the sample, maybe, we raise it up a little bit. So now let's take a listen to that. Okay, maybe this one, let's have it go up high. And now let's adjust that bass, because since we're splitting the highs and the lows, we're not going to lose that low end in the sound, so we can get really... So you can adjust this depth to get slightly different versions of the sound. So you have this. Let's turn the depth all the way to the left. And if we turn the depth all the way up to the right. So once again, to get more movement within the sound, we can automate these parameters. And let's just see what this looks like. And now if we adjust the saturation slowly, the drive over time rather. So right there, this 808 has a lot more texture and character compared to if we turn all of this off. This is just one of the applications with OTT and saturator. There'll be times where I'll use multiple instances of OTT and saturator rather on a sound. I'll also use isotope trash if you couldn't tell from the previous tutorials. I love that, and that can often be used instead of saturator, but often, even if I'm using isotope trash, I still like to use saturator because it's so simple, to up that drive, to get a nice warm overdrive, and then, playing around with these algorithms, you can get some really interesting sounds. And let's just turn off OTT for a second to show you what it sounds like without OTT. That actually sounds pretty cool at the end, so, maybe we could turn the OTT off for these last two hits. And this is what I'll start doing. Once I start creating one of these effects racks, is I'll start, toggling on and off different parts of this effects chain to get slightly different variations of a sound. So now let's take a listen to the bass. Okay. That's a little over the top right there. I might just take a utility and turn it on for these last two notes. And then maybe we'll have it be like, 6 or 7 decibels quieter. So there we go. So we're controlling it a little more. Like I showed you with that trick for transitions and intros, throwing an auto filter at the end of here can be great for just sculpting these sounds just a little bit more. So what I'll do, especially on these really bright notes here, is maybe do a bit of a low pass sweep. Whoop. On this as well, and we're just sculpting the sound a little more. So now, let's turn the auto filter on just for this part. All right, so now we have. So we're just reining in the sound a little bit, and that's what I like to do, especially using saturator, is you start and you get the sound really intense and really over the top, and then you kind of dial it back and bring it back to a nice in between moment. So hopefully you find use out of this effects chain. I know I have, and you can mix and match. So this is just one particular chain. I might double it and then go ahead and change this algorithm to something completely different, and then boom, you have a B version to your bass, you have a C version, and you can kind of turn on and off the different effect chains to get different versions of the sound. So for this next effects chain, we're going to be building off of the bass that we were working on for this last one, and what we're going to be doing here is adding that nice top end fuzz to the bass. And so what we're going to do is duplicate this audio effect rack chain, and let's call it high. And then in this high chain, let's go ahead and select everything and delete it. And don't worry, it's still in the mids here. So what we're going to do is grab an EQ8, and right off the bat, let's kind of do a bandpass filter. And listen for the frequencies that we're going to turn into this top end of the bass. So the next step is applying good old OTT, and you guessed it, saturator, to this frequency range. And with the saturator, let's boost that bass all the way up, because in this case we want it to be really bright and crisp. And then let's up the drive accordingly. And then, of course, let's add an EQ8 to the end, because we're going to want to sculpt these frequencies. So let's go around that 2 to 3 hertz range, and then maybe finish this around 10 or 11,000 hertz. So this is getting closer, but it's still very harsh and abrasive. And to help ease up on that harshness, I'm going to use erosion and throw it after the saturator here, and select wide noise and drag it all the way up to the right. And we're just filling out the sound a little more and getting a little more of a stereo feel to kind of work with for this bass. And so what we can do here is further smooth it out by using a chorus after the erosion. So it's getting close, but I still don't like that popping sound at the beginning of every 808 on this top end. So to counteract that, let's do an auto filter and do a handy dandy low pass sweep here at the beginning. There we go. And I'm just going to, there we go, copy the envelope and paste it in. So let's take a listen to it now. Okay, so now in the context of the whole bass. And it doesn't sound that much by itself, but adding it to this bass, we get just a nice top end finish. And then you can do things like cut out this middle frequency band entirely and have like a B version for the bass. So let's take a listen to that. And, we can go further in on this particular frequency band. Maybe since it's still pretty dry, let's add a bit of reverb to the end here. So maybe right before the EQ8. And let's up that decay, the dry wet. Let's turn the quality to high. Obviously do a low cut. And so now, playing it with all the parts. Versus. And now, if we're getting into the fine tuning of the frequencies, so maybe we go to this first EQ8 and we start scanning up a little higher. There we go. Now we're getting that crisp high end. So when combining all of the bands together. So from here on out, all the changes you'll make will be pretty minor, but it's those finishing touches to a bass that can really take it to the next level. So, we could go from here, we could adjust this erosion, maybe changing it from wide noise to like sine. Adjusting that chorus. And then we could start doing automations like we were doing with the OTT and saturator on the bass. We could start automating some of these parameters and get a little more movement. All right, so this fourth effects chain that I'll be showing you is for hi-hats. And not only is it good for getting more movement in the hi-hats, between the left and right channels, but also elevating the hi-hats to be more than just hi-hats, to act also as an effect texture. In my music, I try to make each sound do as much as possible. So if I can have, a bass that has textures up top that sound like, other effects layers, then that's great. And so that's what we're going to be doing with these hi-hats. So I went ahead and dragged in a hi-hat sample and created a little loop. So let's take a listen to that unprocessed. So it's very simple. We're getting some different repetitions there. Now we can really affect it. And the first thing we're going to do is grab an EQ8. And the reason for doing that is if we play the sample, you'll notice how there's some low frequencies coming through, and I'm just going to want to get rid of those. If this was the case with a song, I'd want the bass to be there, the other drums. The hi-hat in this case is really only happening up, around that 10,000 hertz, between 1 and 10K. So I'm going to go ahead and isolate those frequencies, and I'm also going to do a bit of a low pass on top, just to control the frequencies a little more, to take a little bit of that harshness up off the top end. So now's where the fun part starts. So let's grab an auto pan. I'm going to select the preset around the head, which I just find to be a great start. And if you take a listen, already we're getting that nice skittering between the left channel and the right channel. Being that it's not synced, it's auto panning slightly different each time, so you're getting that sense of randomization. You could get that as well with like randomizing the velocity in your hi-hats, but here we're just kind of randomizing that panning a bit. And so you can go ahead and you can adjust the amount. And if you adjust the amount, we'll get a much subtler effect. Adjusting the rate. It's pretty self-explanatory. And the phase and shape's already set up nicely, which is why I like the around the head preset. So now that we have some auto panning, let's take some grain delay and apply that to the hi-hat. And I'm going to go ahead and select the rubber band preset. I find that a great place to start for creating almost metallic effects lines. So let's take a listen to what the hi-hats sound like now with the rubber band grain delay preset. Already, we're getting some interesting tonality. And as you can see on this XY axis, we have pitch down here and frequency up here. So as we adjust it, you can notice the change in tone. Now if we do like pitch down here and spray up top, ooh, that's interesting. Maybe let's do feedback and spray. Do feedback and pitch. So right there we have a lot to work with, and we could go about this a few ways. We could set some automation points and do some automation, or we could go ahead and create a new track here. Select auto, arm the track, and let's set the external in to be the hi-hats. So in this case, the 6 hats 3. Let's make sure this plus is turned on. So that way you're not overriding the sample when you record in a loop. You'll be able to drag out the entire recording after the fact. So let's just hit record and start getting some sounds with the hi-hat. Okay, so let's take a listen to what we have now. And if you find that this end result is getting a little bit out of whack, we could layer this with the original hi-hats up here. Maybe let's go ahead and just put on the default rubber band. And so now let's listen to the combined hi-hats. So that's kind of neat. And we could take this one step further and we could do some fading and kind of have this wet hi-hat come in slowly over time. So it starts with the nice, clean hi-hat. Well, cleanish. And if you wanted to go one level deeper than that, you could, reverse this. I would just really like that by itself, so maybe that's really what it needed. This is just an example of, getting an interesting effects chain and then recording yourself jamming out on it and coming up with interesting combinations and getting an end result that might not be what you planned when you started, but that's the exciting part about exploring. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Let me know in the comments below what topics you'd like to see me cover next. And I have seen all of your comments already for what you've suggested, and I'm going to try to cover all those topics. So look forward to many, many sound design tutorial videos to come. As always, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. My name's Nowhere the Boy, and keep on making those beats.